Mr. Pond Boss, tell me what to do to make all my Lunker Lake dreams come true.
Hello everybody, Bob Lusk. It must be Tuesday and I must be at home and I must have a cell or internet service. Welcome to this Tuesday night live broadcast. We're going to talk about ponds today. I got a couple of questions thrown at me today, actually a bunch of them. The Institute of Higher Pondology is going to happen next week. We have a full house. I'm pretty fired up about it. And looks like the guys at birddogit.com are going to ask me some questions. So one of the questions is, and I thought I'd tackle it right here live with you guys until you guys start pitching some questions at me. What are the most common mistakes landowners make when managing a bass population in private ponds? Hello, Danny Mac. Good to see you, buddy. Can't wait to hang out with you next week. We're gonna have a big time, man. I'll tell you what, we got a big time lined up for the Institute of Higher Pondology next week. And I was talking to Chico today. He's going to be there. He told me you were coming. He's pretty fired up. So what are the most common mistakes landowners make when managing a bass population in private ponds? Hello, Charles Schurig. There's John Dyer. So that question is, what are some of the common mistakes? I was talking to Josh Sackmar today. He gave me a call with Red Hills Hatchery over in Georgia. And they grow the Titan bass. And the most impressive thing about those guys to me is the genetic studies that they do. They have figured out that there's 12 genetic markers that trophy bass need to really hit their potential on size stuff. And he called me, he says, man, one of the things that's a little frustrating to me is I take some of these high-powered genetic fish and go put them in lakes, and these people are usually well-to-do or at least have the means to be able to have a nice pond. He said, but cannot tell you how many times I go and there's a mud hole, or it's just a big bowl with no structure in it. So the most common mistakes that I think people make when trying to create and manage a bass pond is, first of all, they don't do enough homework. They don't study the watershed. He was telling me, Josh was talking today about a lake where he delivered fish today, and there's cattle waiting in the pond, but yet the guy wants to grow trophy bass. Cattle cause erosion. It's not that hard to fence them off of the pond and then make water available, down below with a siphon pipe and a fill gadget, a fill valve. And he said that the watershed upstream was mowed down to about 2 inches as Bermuda grass, it coming right off of a pasture where over 5,000 head of cattle are ranging through there over like 10,000 acres or whatever it was. So he said the watershed is full of nutrients, the grass was cut short, and the water was muddy. Hello, Virgil Meyer. Good to see you, buddy. And so the common mistakes I see is people don't plan far enough ahead. Here comes Bay. Yep, somebody likes cattle in the lake. Makes for a pretty good pastoral view, right? Yep. Well, you know what, Bay, though? You got special cattle, and you got a special lake, and that's not the only watering hole they got. This was a 3-acre pond. So, the most common mistakes that I see people make is they don't understand happy water. They don't provide the right habitat. Over my career, I have looked at literally hundreds and hundreds of ponds and lakes, thousands of them probably. And the new ones that are just built, most of the time when somebody builds one, they think about structure for bass. Well, you're going to have to... I'm a little slow on the uptake today, babe. Tarzan's nuts love the water. Does it cost me to germinate or something? Oh, look at there. John Henry knows how to play. So does Virgil. Hashtag Pond Boss Magazine. Click like, share this to your timeline, and you'll be eligible for a drawing for a Pond Boss hat. And Leanne tells me we just got a bunch of good, cool hats in this week. So we have hats. So share. Tarzan. Oh, Tarzan the bull. Oh, okay. And you've got those cattle with the long hair I can't think of the name, but they're pretty. They're European. They're small. And Tarzan likes to wade out up to his in your lake, where the crappie can clean him up, or the bluegills, or something. You get me off topic. Easy to do, right? You know that deal. So, habitat. That's one of the common mistakes people make. They'll build habitat for bass, but they don't know what they don't know to give any consideration at all to building the right kind of habitat for what bass eat. You know, bluegill are the primary food chain, food source, prey item. And if you don't have places that they can spawn, if you don't have places where the baby bluegill can hide, then that's one of the shortcomings. That's one of the common mistakes. There's many, many, many times over the last 30 plus years of looking at new lakes and ponds, I'll go see where somebody has created absolutely fantastic structure for bass to hide or bass to congregate with zero thought to what bass eat. Because you got to remember, it takes 10 pounds of bait fish for a bass to gain a pound. There's Michael Harrelson, Mr. Otto's right-hand man and son-in-law, who's kind of surprised. Well, I guess it is dark outside. You probably are off of the equipment for the day. Another mistake people make is they're not proactive on how to manage the fish. So in other words, weigh and measure some bass. The bass are going to gain weight. So when you stock it properly, that's another little pet peeve I've got, is that Michael Harrelson can relate with this. Somebody will go in to build a lake, and they think it's going to cost X amount of money, but it costs like 1X times 2.5. So 25% more. Yeah, the sun does go down too early. It's fixing to change though, right? It's going to go down way earlier. You're going to get home and play with those kids. Hello, Kitty Sanderson. So, when all that happens, you just, oh shoot, already lost track. Where was somebody throw me a bone. I'm not going to be confused. I'm talking about fish. Bluegill habitat, bluegill structure, bait fish. Oh, what they don't know is stocking rates. Like where I was going with that was, hello, Christopher Aguilar. I know, you're getting frustrated with me. I'm getting frustrated with me. So, it costs more to build the lake. And then the fish guy comes in after that, and I can't tell you how many times landowners say, you know what, way over budget on building this pond. We're going to have to cut back on the fish budget. No, you're not going to cut back on the fish budget. Because if you do, you're going to screw up, and you won't know it until you're 3 or 4 years in. That's when you figure it out. And by that time, you've lost the majority of the best growth potential for that fishery. Now here's a tip. Remember this. This is real important to know. The fish are a response. The fisheries are a response to what you offer. Here's what I'm talking about. Michael Harrelson doesn't live too far from Lake Texoma. Hello, Ron Krisman. He lives a long way from Lake Texoma. But if I said, hey, if you want to go striper fishing, where are you going to go? Lake Texoma. Because the striper fishery in Lake Texoma is a response to what they're offered. That lake is like 34, 35 miles long, a lot of open water. Threadfin shad thrive in it. Stripers can spawn in it. Gizzard shad grow in it. So it's the perfect habitat, the perfect water. The water's slightly salty, which stripers love that. Stripers are really saltwater fish that come back into freshwater to spawn. But that water is just salty enough and fresh enough in Lake Texoma and the Red River that stripers can spawn. It's only one of two places. So those fish respond to that environment and that water quality. If I said, hey, let's go see if we can catch a double-digit bass, where are we going to go besides Bay's house? We're going to go over to Lake Fork in East Texas, or Santee Cooper, or we're going to go, to Florida to catch a big bass. That's because that fishery responds to what is offered. So one of the common mistakes that people make is they don't create the right kind of habitat suited for that environment. And they don't think to include the bait fish habitat. And then they don't weigh and measure the fish. They put them in there, Maybe you stock them at the right rates. Hello, Greg McMillan. Man, I'm looking forward to next week. I've got the agenda all finished. I'm going to be emailing everybody that's coming to next week's Institute of Higher Pondology. You'll get an email from me tomorrow that's going to give you, John Dyer is online. He's coming. He's created an app that has all the skinny on it. It's where you can tap in and look at the PowerPoints before you even show up. You can see the agenda, which I'm going to email to everybody tomorrow. We've got the menu set. We've got the speakers set. We're going to have a big time, big time. So the other common mistakes that people make is they don't track the fishery as it goes. Most people are reactive rather than proactive. And when you're reacting, you're hitting something after the fact when you've lost some of the potential. So if you're weighing and measuring bass as you go, you're going to see their, if you stock it right in the beginning like you should, bluegill food chain, Kenny says, that's right. So as the food chain grows, so do the bass. The bass grow along with them. So you get the food chain over here, stock the bass here, then here we are about 18, see here we are, food chain, bass. Now we're at about 2 years, 2.5 years, 2.5, 3 years, 3.5. By about 3 years, 3.5, it's right here. Pretty soon the bass are going to get to this point where there's more mouths feeding on a food chain because the food chain can't quite keep up. Then the food chain will deteriorate, and at that point, there'll be certain sizes of bass within that population that will start to lose weight. When that happens, now you're being reactive. Whereas if people will go in and monitor their growth rates, monitor the lengths and weights of the bass are a true indicator as to when that food chain is kind of getting to the point that it's going to start to deteriorate. Hello, Jeremy Day. Good to see you, buddy. So those are some of the main things that people do wrong. I say wrong. It's mistakes people make just because you don't know what you don't know. So summarize it. Good, happy water. If the fish are living in a septic tank, they're not going to thrive. They might even die. That happens. Got to have the right kind of habitat for not just the bass, but all the different size classes of the different species. If you're going to have red ear sunfish, you need what they need to spawn. Have bluegill, same thing. Like for example, when a bluegill is first hatched, some of you guys are saying this out loud already because I've said this so many times. It's funny. 12,000 per pound is what bluegill weigh when they're first hatched. 12,000 per pound. If you can provide the right kind of habitat and the right kind of food chain for them, then you're going to see much better success rates. If you can keep those bluegill alive for 45 days, even up there where Kenny Sanderson paid the dumb tax, they'll be 30 per pound. That's significant. Kenny Sanderson, you know what, Kenny, I'm not going to talk about you because I love you, and our learning curves are steep when it hits us in the back pocket. And Kenny got hit in the back pocket. He lost some smallmouth bass and some stripers, hybrid stripers and some things. And he did it because he got a little bit, I'm going to use the word greedy, although there's not one greedy thing about Kenny Sanderson. So he had too many fish packed into too confined an area, probably too many species, and he had a fish die off. Are there any apps to measure and record relative weight? Yes, there are. There are. I'm glad you said that. You can look in Pond Boss magazine, and there's an app advertisement for my good friend Wade Bales over in South Carolina. He's created an app called SmartFish App. SmartFish App. Look that one up. SmartFish App. Look that up in the App Store. It's free, and you can weigh and measure fish while you're in the boat, plug them in on your phone, and it will grade those fish. It will tell you what their relative weight is. It'll tell you, where they sit on that channel. And you can find out, like for example, if you're out there fishing and you want to make an instantaneous decision and you can't look at that fish and tell if it's too big, too small, just right, kind of like the Three Bears, right? You eat the porridge, you chase Goldilocks out of the pond. What you do is you can use that app and it's going to tell you. John Dyer, message me. Well, Jeremy, I think it will record them, but I think you got to pay a small fee. So it's free to be able to weigh and measure a fish and judge that fish. But in order for them to store that, then you got to pay a little bit. Your other choice is to weigh and measure some, plot them on a spreadsheet that we'll provide for you. Let's see what Lori Moreno-Wanke says. I really don't know what I don't know. Boy, that's the truth of all of us, you know. You know? You don't know what you don't know? You know? I know. You know. Here we go. I've taken over my parents' pond as they have passed away. What is the smartest way to supplement the population? The best way to supplement the population is to know what you need to supplement. That goes back to data. The more data you can collect on that fishery, the better decisions you can make to manage it. So supplementing the population, what that question is asking is, what do I need to do to make sure that that population of fish is healthy? Well, job one is you got to know what you've got. So if you've got largemouth bass, weigh and measure some. While the weather's cool, put some night crawlers under a bobber on a small hook and go brim fishing. See if you can catch some sunfish. Identify them. The better you can identify your fish and identify the species you've got and the different sizes of those species of fish, the better decision you can make. So let me give you an example of that. And I'm presuming, Lori, that you're talking about a bass bluegill pond, which is what most people are talking about when I'm talking to them. There's really only 4 scenarios. There's bass crowded. In a bass crowded pond, the largemouth bass are overcrowded. You could tell that because most of them are the same size and they're underweight, seriously underweight, like relative weight's under 90. I've seen in overcrowded bass lakes, the relative weight would be somewhere between 65 and maybe 92, and the majority of them 82 to 85. And you only catch one size of bluegill, and that's big ones. That's bass crowded. The second scenario is bluegill crowded. Now that happens some in northern tier states, not so much in southern tier states, but some of them, Lori, if I remember, I think you're in the Midwest. You might come across bluegill crowded ponds. In the bluegill crowded ponds, the bluegill are all pretty good size, 4 to 6 inches, maybe some 7 inchers. Not many babies because they're preying on themselves. The bass are few and far between because the recruitment's been low because the bluegill are nest raiders because they got to the point they're so crowded. The third scenario is balance, which is fleeting. You have to work to hit balance, and it only happens for a few minutes, a few hours, a few days most of the time because the predator fish are always trying to overwhelm the food chain. So here's what balance means. Balance means is you have multiple sizes of all species of fish, and they're chunky. Their relative weights are close to 100. So that means in a bass bluegill pond, Lori, you would have 4 to 6 different sizes of bluegills from that big to that big to that big to that big to that big. And you'll have 4, 5, 6 different size classes of bass from this year's babies like that, to this, to this, to this, to that. And if you've got that, then you're balanced. The fourth scenario is a transition between those 3. Now here's where that happens. That happens during a drought, happens after a flood, and it happens after a fish kill. So that's your 4 scenarios. So when you go in to collect data, you collect it, get lengths and weights, identify the species, go down to go down to Shields and buy a seine. Go to Walmart, get a short seine, and drag it through the shallows and see if you can find any baby fish. Go fishing. Do an electrofishing survey. If you've got a very big lake and it's real important to you, and you don't want to waste a lot of dollars, spend the money on an electrofishing survey. That can tell you volumes. Let's see here. Northern California. That's almost Midwest. So Northern California ponds are similar to. They're not too far apart from Midwest ponds because in the northern part of the state, you're going to have some cold weather. Hello, Ron Ardoin. I'm going to see Ron next week. Ron, we got like 4 or 5 guys on here tonight. They're going to be coming to the Institute next week. I'm looking forward to hanging out with you guys. Just leave the boudin at home. All right, let's see here. Jeremy Day, I've started weighing bluegill. Year-old, most are 6 to 7.5, and relative weight 115 to 120. I'm guessing that great. They look pretty fat. Getting excited for the bass start getting. Yeah, that's good. So when you're year-old bluegill, I guess you're saying they're 6 to 7.5. What? Year-old 6 to 7.5 ounces? I guess that's what that would be. That's what that would be. If they're a year old and weigh 6 to 7.5 ounces, that's almost half a pound. That's really good. That's good. Hey, there's David Schneiderman. He's coming in next week too. Easy Docks of Texas. David's going to plan on hanging out with us next week. You'll be getting an email from me tomorrow, David, and we're going to talk about some of that stuff. 6 to 7.5 inches, and they're a year old? Dude, you're way ahead of the curve if they're that big. If they're 6 to 7.5 inches, then they're going to weigh, if they're 6 to 7.5 inches, they're going to weigh 5 ounces. And for a year old, that's good. You got a shot at some 12 to 13 inch long. None of them weigh half pound yet. Yep, okay, yep. All right, if they're 6 to 7.5 inches, they're a year old. That's rapid growth. That's real fast growth. All right, guys, throw a few questions at me. I don't want to run out of topics, which I won't, but I'd rather you create the topics than me. So I'm waiting on you guys. Hey, Pond Boss Magazine, look at here. Comes to you in this plastic bag. Great article, this issue called Fall Fish Growth. That's a good topic. I think I might hit that. Might talk about that here in just a minute. $35 a year, cheaper than a Friday night date, and it lasts a year. Go to pondboss.com. There's a way to subscribe to it there. Or when I send you an email, down in my signature line, Leanne's figured out how to put a link in there where you can subscribe to Pond Boss Magazine. Easy Docks of Texas. David Schneiderman, he's right here. Let's get him involved in this stuff. Check out his website, Easy Docks of Texas. You want a floating dock? Need a floating dock? Does your pond water fluctuate levels? You could use one of those. Purina Mills, love their Aquamax game fish chow. Love their MVP. I love all the fish foods they have. One thing I love about Purina Mills is they develop fish foods for specialty feeding. So if you say, hey, I want to grow tilapia out or I want to grow catfish out, there's a food for that. You want to feed bluegills, there's feed for that. You want to feed medium-sized bass, Kenny's laughing at me there for that. You can do that. Texas Hunter Products, they're going to be there next week. Cody Borgfeld's going to be there. He's one of the big dogs at Texas Hunter Feeders, Texas Hunter Products. He's going to be there bringing some products so we can all investigate and look at and see. So, okay, let's see. I got more questions. What other? Oh, we got Bird Dog It. BirdDogIt.com. Check them out. You know, and I'd promote my institute, but we're full. We're going to schedule one for next spring. We'll do it again. I don't know that we'll go to Jimmy Houston's next spring though, but we'll do an Institute of Higher Pondology. Hey, my first memoir book's coming out. There's like 28 stories in it. Most of those stories are pre-2000. And I got some cool cartoons in them because I didn't have any photos back then. But that book's coming out. It's going to be about $30, and I'll tell you more about it. They're working on the cover now. When that cover comes in, I'll get a copy of it, and I'll show you what we got. Then we'll get serious about seeing who all wants one. Greg McMillan, is there a certain water temperature you like to see in the fall before you conduct an electrofishing survey? Yes. Yes, I like to see the water in the low 70s, upper 60s. When the water temperature gets down into the low 70s, the fish tend to come up from the down deep. You know, I met up with American Sportfish Hatchery's boat with Dallas Clark, who's going to be at the Institute next week. And we electrofished a lake south of Kansas City in Missouri last week. The temperature when we got there, the water temperature was 79. Should not have been that warm. We did okay, but we could look on the live scope. We could see bukus of fish at 8 to 9 feet deep. We measured the thermocline. This is pretty cool. Here's some really good stuff. American Sportfish just bought a YSI meter, one of the expensive, great ones. It's got a 100-foot cable on it. Well, that lake is 65 feet deep. Well, most lakes, especially lakes 25 feet or less, the thermocline typically sits halfway down. Deeper lakes, it varies somewhat based on how the lake lays and how much current it's got with wind blowing across the lake or along the lake. So we went out and we dropped the probe down at the surface. It was 79 degrees at the surface when we got there. See, that was the last, last Monday afternoon. Yeah, a week ago yesterday. Monday afternoon we got there. And that's where I couldn't broadcast because I didn't have any internet there. So we put the probe over the side of the boat, 79 degrees, dropped it down 5 feet, it was 78 degrees. We dropped it to 10 feet, it was 73 degrees. We dropped it to 15, it was 63 degrees. So we pulled it up, and at 63 degrees, the oxygen was 3.7 parts per million, which that's just above lower lethal for bass and bluegill. So the bass and bluegill could be in that 63-degree water and still be able to breathe and not suffocate. So we raised it up and we found that the thermocline in this lake that is 65 feet deep, mind you, in the deepest, the thermocline sat at about 12 feet and it looked to be about 18 inches thick. Where at 12 feet, the water temperature was 70 degrees, oxygen levels were about 6.5 parts per million, but when we dropped it to 12, it was 63 degrees, 10-degree drop, with 3.6 parts per million. Well, we went ahead and dropped it down in increments of 5 feet, all the way to the bottom, and where we were sitting it was 40 feet deep. The temperature of that water in 40 feet of depth was 50 degrees. Yes, it was. Oxygen was 0.6 parts per million. Pretty interesting stuff. Hello, Howard Dittrich. Good to see you, buddy. The heart doctor. Howard Dittrich has a heart, and he's inspected a few in his lifetime. I'm going to stop right there and drink water. So Jeremy Day bought a seine. He came in. What are the best nets to buy? So Jeremy has a hatchery pond. So he was asking me, what seine net do I need to buy? So what I told him was to buy one that's 25% longer than your pond is wide. He's got a long, narrow, rectangular pond that's the bottom of it slopes like this, which down here it's probably 6 feet deep. Up here it's probably 4 feet deep, I'm guessing. So I said, buy it 25% wider than the pond is wide, or longer than the pond is wide, and make sure that it's deep enough that it's, if you have a 6 foot deep pond, make sure it's at least 8 feet deep, 3/8 inch mesh. The reason I said that, because his goal is to raise the bluegills. So if he's going to seine it in the fall, he can go out there right now and pull that seine through that pond. Well, I wouldn't do it now, the water's still too warm. And pull it from one end to the other, bring it in, have some stakes, get you some sucker rod stakes that are about 6 feet tall with a weld V on the end, so you can push them in the mud, hang the seine over that rod. That way you got extra people holding the seine up. There's your good little hint. I think I still have 4 of those, and I don't want to ever pull my seine again because I did it for 46 years or 45 or something. Right, Bay? Bay, did you drop out, Bay? Are you still there, Bay? So, but the reason I said 3/8 inch is that way any brand new baby bluegills that were hatched can swim through that mesh, because if you try to catch them, they're going to get beat to death just viciously by the fish that you do catch. So basically what you're doing is you're providing escape plans for all those brand new baby fish that can grow up through the rest of the fall and then the next spring. Howard Dittrich has no thermocline because of surface diffuser and air rays. Yep, my fish live in oxygen luxury. Virgil Meyer, with the water cooling off, what temp do things really start to shut down? Depends on the species of fish. I know where you are, Virgil. You're in Iowa. So here's the way that works. Largemouth bass get sluggish in the upper 50s They don't really shut down at 55, but they're really, really slow at 55. 55 degrees, their metabolism rate is so slow that it won't stop them from feeding, but what it will do is make them stop being aggressive. 55 is a magic number for catfish. 45 to 47 is the magic temperature for bluegills. So bluegills, you know, they like cooler water. Walleye, I'm going to tell you, they've really begun to slow down around 40. Smallmouth bass, 45. Rainbow trout, their prime operating temperature is 55 degrees. That's where they go the best. When the water gets down into the low 40s, upper 30s, trout aren't very active. Bay's still watching. He's watching Tarzan over there in his water. In the dark, he's got his night vision goggles on, watching Tarzan wade out to get nibbled on by bluegills. Jeremy Day, what kind of rods? I'll tell you what I used. So what I did, back when I built these rods, I had a fabricator, a welder friend of mine, and he had some sucker rods, oil-filled sucker rods, laying in his yard. So I had him cut those sucker rods off and cut them off 6 feet long and put a little V, just weld an angle at the top, and had him put a 1/4-inch plate about 4 inches square, about 18 inches up from the bottom of the stake, and that way I could step on that plate, shove it down in the mud, and then hang my seine over that V on that rod, on that sucker rod. Each one of those sucker rods weighs about 10 or 15 pounds, so they're not light, but they got to be pretty heavy duty so the seine doesn't pull them over when you stick them down in the mud. Yep, that's not something you thought you'd learn tonight, is it? There was a span of my life when I seined. Oh my gosh, when I was actively running a fish hatchery twice, I didn't learn my lesson the first time. I got one story in particular that's in my book. And the reason it's in my book is because when this happened, I made up my mind I really needed to quit, go do something else. It was too hard, too much work. And the story's like this. This was in 1987, so I'm pretty young, 33, I think, and 32. Anyway, my first wife had left me with the kids. I'm getting a little personal here. Well, it was a struggle, and I had to get them up every day, get them to school, feed them, bathe them, all that stuff, and try to run a business. Well, I decided about a week before Christmas that I was going to shut everything down, drain all the fish tanks, all the vat, not the ponds, but drain the vats, and then kick things back off right after New Year's. Take off a couple of weeks and just spend time with the kids. Well, so we go through the first week. We get to Christmas Eve, have issues. Christmas Day, great time with my kids. I had 3 little kids, 14, 6, and 4. Is that right? Yeah, that's about right. 14, 6, and 4. 2 boys and a girl. The youngest and oldest were boys. The middle one was a girl. Well, their mama had bailed out. Well, on Christmas afternoon, there came a knock on the door because we lived in a house right beside the fish farm in Whitesboro, Texas. I go into the door, and there's this elderly gentleman, like me, said, "Hey, do you run the fish hatchery?" "Yes, sir, I do." He said, "Well, I'd like to stock some fish I got a buddy whose pond just filled up about a month ago, and for Christmas, I'd like to stock some fish." I said, "It's Christmas Day." He said, I know. And he said, "How soon could you get out there with some fish?" I said, "Well, I don't have any fish up. It'll be at least 2 weeks. I'm going to wait until after New Year's, and then it'll take me a few days to start gathering up fish again." So he reaches in his pocket, pulls out his billfold, and fans out 10 $100 bills. He said, "How quick can you get some fish?" I said, "When do you want them?" He said, "Well, maybe tomorrow or the next day." God dang it. Yeah. Okay, what do you want? Tell me what you want. So we started going through it, and basically I was going to have to seine 7 ponds by myself, which I'd done that. I didn't really care that much. I mean, I just didn't like it. It wasn't fun. And it was Christmas Day, of all things. So I started thinking about it, and I said, all right. And he handed me that $1,000, and I had 1,000 reasons to go seine 7 ponds. So the next day, I got up like right at daylight, and it was 55 degrees the day after Christmas. So I went out, and I seined the hardest ponds first, turned the well on, got the concrete tanks full, and when you seine a pond, you got to have those stakes to hold the seine up so the fish don't escape. And then you have to pump water onto a transport tank, and you put the fish in a tub, and you carry them up the levee, and you put them in the transport tank. Then you take them to the concrete vats, and that water temperature is different. So you got to pump water from that concrete vat into the transport tanks. Then you put the fish in the concrete tanks. Then you go do it again. Then you go do it again. Then you go do it again. And getting toward the end of the day, you got these fish hardened up in that warmer well water. Then you got to go kind of sort through them a little bit. So I got to the 6th pond that day. Of course, I stopped in the middle, went and made sure the kids had food, had them out there with me part of the day, fed them, loved on them, all that stuff that you do as a dad. And then just before dark, I had one more pond to seine. And all I needed was 8 bass about this long, and it was a little bitty pond, not even 1/10 of an acre. And I put 10 bass in there that were that big. Just a few weeks earlier that I shocked up or seined up or something, I don't remember. So anyway, I was exhausted. It was getting dark, and I'd been listening to WBAP 820 on your AM radio dial. Back then it was a 50,000 watt blowtorch channel, and Harold Taft was the world's greatest weatherman. Well, he told all of us that were listening to him that day, on the day after Christmas, that there was a blue norther coming, and the temperatures were going to plummet, and the wind was going to shift out of the northwest, gust up to 25 miles an hour, and I could look right over there in the northwest. I could see it coming just before dark. But I was done. I couldn't move anymore. I was exhausted. I had to get back, fix supper. So I loaded the seine and went and piled it up on the shore so the next day I could go out there earlier in the morning and get the rest of those fish. And that would give me 3 or 4 hours to sort through, grade fish, count fish, then get them loaded and get them over to that guy before the weather got really, really, really ugly. Well, I thought it might be cold the next morning, so I washed my waders, got all the mud off of them, and I put them in the laundry room so they'd be warm. So the next morning we had a thermometer on the porch. It was 17 degrees. 17 degrees. So I put on a pair of wool socks, long handles, another pair of wool socks, blue jeans, coveralls, jackets, three shirts, long sleeve shirt, t-shirt, long sleeve shirt, button-up lumberjack shirt, and a jacket. Put on my waders, and I went to seine that last pond. Well, there was a skim of ice on it already. It went from 55 to 17, which meant the water was getting close to freezing. Well, there was a little skim of ice, and oh my gosh, I sat down and I started weeping. I don't want to do this anymore. It's too hard. And this little voice over here said, "Shut up, dumbass. This is what you're supposed to do." The other one was whining and saying, and the other one said, "Shut up." So I pulled that seine around. Guess how many bass I caught? I needed 8. Guess how many I caught? 8. So I knew there was something going on there. So I went, and of course, when you have ice in a pond, you got to take a dip net and scoop all the ice out of the seine because that's going to kill the fish. Well, we didn't want any dead fish. So bottom line, I got all those fish, got them delivered that day, took my kids with me, froze our little butts off, but that guy got his fish, and I had $100 bills times 10. And that's about the time I stopped enjoying seining so much. Jeremy, when you transfer a bluegill to big pond, do I need to acclimate them or can I just put them in? You can use T-post. I've used T-post. The problem with T-post is they will tear your seine, and they're hard to get out of the mud. And they got that little V thing at the bottom, and you got to have good shoes to push those down in the mud, and you got to push them down in far enough that they don't tip over. So yeah, you can use T-post. I've done it. They're not as easy as what I use, but that's probably your best choice. Hello, R.E. Thompson. Good to see you, buddy, my Mississippi friend from Petal, Mississippi. Steve Jess, for a new pond, how old should the pond be before you do the first electrofishing survey to maximize efforts and data? Year 3. If you built it right and you've built the right kind of habitat and you've stocked it right and you've nurtured those fish, by year 3, that's when the bass begin to reproduce. That's when you really need to be looking at length and weight data in order to decide when it's time to start harvesting fish. So I don't see any need to electrofish a pond the first couple of years, because you'll be disappointed in the data you collect, because there's not that many fish per unit of water until you hit that 3rd year. And once you hit that 3rd year and get toward the end of that 3rd year, that's when you're going to start to see some things really beginning to shift. The crop is getting bigger, the numbers are going up, and that's to me, that's the best time to do an electrofishing survey is at the end of the 3rd year. That's my take. So, let me back up, see if I missed any questions, because oftentimes I do. Howard has no thermocline, but Howard's Lake is also in Florida, in the panhandle of Florida. So that's a good spot to aerate water. Kansas City, I would not aerate 65 feet of water south of Kansas City. Okay, I already talked about Greg's question. Let's see here. All right, I think I've covered everybody's questions. Well, a bunch of you guys that are watching this tonight, I cannot wait to hang out with you next week. We'll do one more broadcast before that, but I think I'm going to get there on Wednesday afternoon and start getting things ready for you guys. They're going to show up at before noon, around noon on Thursday, and we're going to get at it and have a great time. Well, guys, I don't see any more questions. It's 8:12. We've been at it 42 minutes or so. I think that's a good time to kind of wrap it up. So, guys, you know what? I always do appreciate you guys hanging out with me and asking these questions. It helps keep me on the ball. Not Tarzan's balls, but on my own. Uh-oh, Jeff Wallen, after I lost all my fish, I found a lot of leopard frogs. They're bravely skimming across. You know what? Go read the book of Exodus. When I hear a thing like that, that makes me think about the water turning blood red, so water was unhappy. All the fish died. What the follow-up after that was insects. So after a pond dies off, the next response is a lot of insects. Then after that, it's frogs. Then after that, the fish start coming back. So that totally makes sense. All right, guys, I'm going to wrap it up. I do appreciate you hanging out with me, and I got a feeling, let's see, next Tuesday I'll be right here. So you'll be able to see the Pond Boss sign behind me. And until next week, adios for now.